Morning everybody, I'm the Bear Bro Brummy, and today I want to talk to you about these things. The question of arrows is something I get a lot at my club, especially by new people, because we don't really explain clearly arrows in any way, shape or form during our beginners course. So what I thought to do is talk to you about the way that I go about choosing the correct arrow length and the correct arrow spine, and maybe help you work your way through the maze and the minefield of choosing the right arrow for yourself. Now, for an experienced archer, it's something you just know. As Grizzly Jim once said, once you know, you know. But the only way we know is that we've made the mistakes. We bought the wrong spine arrows, we've cut them to the wrong length, we wasted money on stuff we can't use. So what I thought to do is go through this video so you don't make the kind of mistakes I made. So let's start at the very beginning. There are 5 basic materials that arrows are made of. They are fiberglass, wood, aluminium, carbon, or a carbon aluminium hybrid at the high end. Let's start with the cheapest and most cheerful. If you buy an archery kit where you get a bow, a string, some arrows, a quiver, a stringer and a tab, and everything you need to basically start at a reasonably low price, the odds are they'll be giving you fiberglass arrows. These arrows are fine if you just want to shoot in your garden, you're not interested in any kind of accuracy or precision, you just simply want to shoot arrows. They're fine. But if you're interested in moving on in archery, they're definitely not the way to go. They're literally worth nothing at all. They're not very strong, they're not very accurate, but it's a starting point and you've got them for free, so it doesn't really matter. Next up from that are wooden arrows. Wooden arrows are generally used in the people that are interested in more the historical aspects of archery. That's difficult to say. And they are aimed at people who are shooting longbows, primitive bows, some types of hunting bows. And in certain societies such as the NFAS and other field archery club societies around the world, there are certain shooting styles that require you to only use wooden arrows. So if you're going in that direction, then that's your only option. Step up from that will be aluminium arrows. They are mass produced by the likes of Easton and Bearpaw and lots of other people like that, and they're really quite good. We call them club arrows if you like. If you've done a beginner's course, you'll have seen unused aluminium arrows, probably because they're quite robust, they're strong, they take a lot of abuse, and they're very good value for money because they tend to be quite cheap, but they do a job. A step up from that will be carbon arrows. Carbon arrows, by the very material, are lighter, faster. The arrows tend to be thinner for the same spine, so you fly through the air more efficiently. It's the kind of arrow I shoot, which I really love. But those are higher end club arrows. And right at the top end are the aluminium carbon hybrid types, such as the Eastern ACEs or the X10s. These are extremely expensive arrows, predominantly manufactured purely for the elite archers of the world. And let's be honest, the elite archers of the world would probably get them for nothing, so don't have to pay for them. But there you go. Anyway, so these arrows are specifically designed to be shot at 70 meters in a controlled environment of some kind, which means that if you shoot field archery where you archery range, your shot range varies from 6 feet up to 100 yards, these arrows aren't going to do you any good. If you're tempted to buy the very high-end arrow, remember this, that the high-end arrow, if you are a good archer, will make your scores better. If your form is not good, i.e. you're only a beginner archer, these arrows will do you no good at all. You're wasting your money going up to those kind of things. Learn to shoot well first and then think about moving up to them if you wish. A good friend of mine who helps me out on the coaching line often these days always says the same thing to people that ask him about arrows, and he says Never buy arrows that you can't afford to lose, because we shoot field archery, which what happens is you will lose arrows, you will break arrows. So therefore, don't spend money on stuff that you are willing to use. Always remember that arrows are considered consumables and should be treated that way. So only buy what you can afford. Okay, so now you've made a decision on what type of archery you want to shoot, you now have a rough idea whether you want what type of material you want to use for your arrows. It's time to start looking at the archery shops websites or visit the store, and you'll find that there are a huge array of arrows to choose from. I looked on my local archery shop the other day and there were about 40 different options for different types of arrows. It's extraordinary. So you need to try and narrow that down somehow. The best way to do it is by price. You know, work out how much you're willing to pay for an arrow, and bearing in mind you'll need at least 6, probably a dozen at a time. So you can work out your budget by that. So anyway, when you speak to your archery retailer or look on the website, there are 2 things they need to know to decide what spine your arrow needs to be. We'll get into spine in a moment. Firstly, they'll need to know what poundage you are drawing through your bow. That varies from what it says on the limbs. I will get to that in a second. Also, they'll need to know what arrow length you require. Now, your arrow length is based upon your draw length, but it's not the same. The arrow length is different to your draw length. If you remember from one of the last videos I did, if we measure the draw length from the plunger button there, that would be your true draw length. If you added your AMO draw length to it, which is an extra 1 3/4 inches, in the case of this particular riser, it takes the draw length to the very end of the riser there. If you're shooting range archery and you're using a clicker, bear in mind that the clicker is extended out of the front. You'll need to add a little bit extra to your arrow to account for the clicker. So that will give you your arrow length in terms of trying to decide what the spine is. That gives you your number. In my case, it's 26.5 inches. I shoot a fairly short draw, but I know what mine is, but yours will be very different to that. The second thing you'll need to know is the true poundage of your bow. And this is where I made my first mistake. If you look on your limb, it says there on the limb that this bow is 44 pounds at 28 inches, which is what I ordered my first arrow at. I told them it was a 44 pound bow, and I ordered my arrows, and guess what? They were completely terrible. The problem is I don't draw 28 inches. What you need to do is find out what your actual draw weight is and not what it says on the limbs. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Okay, so with a bit of calculation, you worked out approximately what your arrow length should be within a very close tolerance. And now it's time to work out what the true poundage of your bow is. Now, you can look at the archery stores and they have a proper bow scale that you can buy. I bought one of these. It was very expensive. It was well over £100, and it does a job. It measures the poundage of your bow fine. Unfortunately, mine broke fairly quickly, so I didn't bother buying another one of them. But what I did do is I went out and I was at my local chemist and I found one of these. These are travel scales. These are designed to measure the weight of your luggage if you're going on holiday. And I found that this is just as accurate as a really expensive bow scale, and it only cost £5. So what I did, all I had to do was adapt the hook, because you had a big hook to go around the handle of a case, so it fits my bow. So what I've done is I've put my bow back together and I've strung it up, and I'll show you how to just check the poundage, the true poundage of your bow. Take your bow, hook your bow scale on, like that, and then just simply draw back to where you normally would. Just to there, like that. Bring it back, have a quick look, and you can see by my bow scale there that even though my limbs say 44 pounds, you can see by that black line there, it's actually 42. So the limbs are lying to me. I don't draw 44 pounds, I only draw 42 pounds. So that's the poundage I need to do when I'm ordering my arrows. Okay, so now you have all the information you need to order your new arrows. You know the true poundage of your bow. You know the length of arrow as the minimum that you need to order. So now it's time to either speak to your archery store or go online and pick your arrow. You will see, or you'll be involved with, something like this. This is an arrow spine chart. This happens to be an Eastern one. Just bear in mind that depending on what make of arrow you choose, you'll need to use the spine chart for that particular manufacturer. These spine charts tend to be slightly different depending on the manufacturer. So it's best thing to do is use the right spine chart for that manufacturer. They're all pretty close, but to get it dead right, you need to use the right one. While we're talking about spine, let's just quickly explain spines to you. We'll start with carbon ones because it's probably the easiest one to understand. Carbon arrows have a number on. See, this one here has 600 written on it. What that means is, when the manufacturers test these arrows, they place it on a mounting which is 28 inches apart. They put a 2 pound weight in the middle, and this arrow will bend 600/1000ths of an inch. If it was a 1000 spine arrow, it would deflect exactly an inch. I've got a little thing up there which I've made myself, which is a very basic arrow spine tester, and I'll show you that in a second. So that's how this works. Basically, the lower the number, the stiffer the arrow. Aluminium arrows, in contrast, work in the opposite direction for some reason. You'll see that this arrow has 1616 on it. Can you just see that? 1616. What the 1616 means is the first 16 means it's the diameter of the aluminium tubing around there, and the second 16 means the actual thickness of the aluminium tubing itself. So naturally these get stiffer as the numbers go up. A 2016 will be thicker than a 1616, making it stiffer, and a 2018 will have a thicker aluminium to it, making it stiffer again. So carbon arrows, the numbers go down as it gets stiffer. Aluminium arrows, the numbers go up as it gets stiffer, which is properly confusing, isn't it? But that's the way they do it. So be aware of that's the way the numbers work. Anyway, I shall set up my spine tester thing there and show you a quick example of the differences between different spines. Okay, so basically what I have here is I've got my 600 spine arrow. I've got two hooks, one there, and just in the center is that little line there. That's specifically designed for me. That's exactly how far a 600 spine arrow bends. I use this just to compare one arrow to another to make sure my spines are all exactly the same. Let me just show you. I've got this here weight, which is 0.92 of a kilo, by the way. Doesn't really matter what it is as long as they all bend the same. And I'll just hang this on the arrow shaft like that, and you see that deflects to that line almost exactly, well, exactly, depends on the arrow, the angle of the camera, but that's exactly where it bends to. If you had a weaker arrow, let's take that off, put the 1616 on I was just talking about. We know this is weaker than a 600 spine. Do the same thing, hang that on, you see that now it bends past the line, which means that that arrow is clearly weaker than the 600 spine. By comparison, I happen to have a 400 spine arrow here. If you put that on there as well, do exactly the same thing. You see that the 400 spine arrow doesn't bend anywhere near as much. Obviously that's completely a stiffer arrow. It's a very basic demonstration. As I say, I use it just to compare all of my arrows to each other to make sure they're all the same spine. And that's basically how arrow spine works. The stiffer the arrow, the less it bends. Okay, so let's have a closer look at the spine chart. As you can see here, I've made up a theoretical bare bow archer at the top, and they've got an arrow length of 29 inches, that's the minimum arrow length they require, and a true poundage out of their bow at 28 pounds. Now, on this side of the scale, this is purely for compound bows, so if you're a recurve archer, you can ignore those ones completely. The one you're interested in is on this side. That's for recurve bows. So there's the poundage numbers that you need to be looking at on that side. First of all, we'll start with the arrow length at 29 inches, which is across the top. It's right there. Right, the true poundage at 28 pounds, which is that column, that second column there, which puts you into the T4 category. Down here in the red box, I've highlighted the group T4 category, and just here, I'll zoom it in a second so you can see clearly. Is all the list of all of Easton's arrows that are applicable to that particular spine. Okay, so I've closed in now on the T4 group, and you can see it's still a little bit confusing. You can see with all these numbers here. The first thing I will say, if you're using ACEs or X10s, you'll see that there's two different spine ratings here and here. Recurve archers, take notice of the one that says an R at the end of it. That's specifically for recurves. You see the ACEs, the X10s and the ACGs all have a specific spine rating for recurve. The numbers on the left side are for compounds, so you can ignore those. All of the rest, let's start from the bottom. X7s, XX75s, Eastern Apollos, Inspires, Carbon 1s, and so on and so forth. The numbers on this side are the spine rating for the arrow you need to be in that group. So if you were choosing, let's say, XX75s, which most people tend to start with, you'll need a 1913 spine. If you were using X7s, you would need a 1914 spine. And that's how the Eastern spine chart works. It looks slightly complicated, but it's actually relatively straightforward if you just break it down a little bit. So there you go. So using that spine chart behind me, you've found out what spine arrow is correct for your particular arrow length. Bearing in mind that arrow length is a minimum. Whenever I order new arrows, I tend to order new arrows that are 3 to 4 inches too long, simply because I will be tuning them at home myself by shortening them down. The extra 3 to 4 inches will make the arrow weaker, and what I need to do is tune the arrow in by gradually shortening the arrow to make it perfectly fit my bow. We'll be doing that in the next video from this one, because if you order your arrows at your bare minimum, and I did this myself, you will find that it's quite possible your arrows might be too stiff. And if they are too stiff, your only option, because you can't make the arrow any longer, is to change the points to heavier points, which involves buying more things. You do want to try and avoid that at all possible. So start with an arrow that is too long by 3 or 4 inches or so, and then we can trim them down to make them tune in perfectly to your bow. I shall put the video up there how to find out your perfect draw length for you to watch if you wish to. I've been the Barebow Brummie. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the video, please click the like button. If you want to subscribe to the channel, please do. Be very helpful. Just click down there. Thank you very much. Goodbye.